Andy spoke about the increasing encroachment of international law standards on American law. And Steve mentioned the Organization of the Islamic Conference and its efforts to criminalize any criticism of Islam or any discussion of the elements of Islam that Islamic terrorists use to justify violence and make recruits among Muslims. And these two things are combining now in the Obama administration and coming here. And so Steve mentioned the prosecutions of Mark Steyn and Geert Wilders, and pretty soon we're going to start seeing these things in the United States. This is not at all an exaggeration or hysteria. I will explain why that is. The Organization of the Islamic Conference, in the first place, after the Muhammad cartoons were published in Denmark several years back, you may recall that there were some caricatures of Muhammad, most notoriously one of him with a bomb in his turban, which is entirely a reasonable sort of editorial cartoon thing to do when so much violence is perpetrated around the world in the name of Muhammad and Islam. In any case, there were international riots. Innocent people were murdered as a result of these cartoons, but probably the most important fallout from that incident was that the Organization of the Islamic Conference, which is the largest voting bloc at the United Nations today, 57 Muslim governments, undertook an initiative to compel the West to criminalize what it called Islamophobia. And specifically in the OIC documents, it makes it very clear that it includes under the rubric of Islamophobia any discussion of the Islamic texts and teachings that Islamic terrorists use to justify what they're doing. So in other words, we would be unable to analyze the motives and goals of our enemies and thus be rendered mute and helpless, defenseless in front of their advance, not able to say anything about it. And Ekmeladin Ihsanolu, the Secretary General of the OIC, was very clear. He spoke in quite dictatorial terms, saying, "We have told the West the red lines that must not be crossed." And he expected, he said, that there would be progress in Western governments to criminalize on the local and state and national levels any criticism of Islam. Radical, moderate, whatever you want to call it. Any criticism. Now, Ekmeladin Ihsanolu was the recipient of a letter from Barack Obama dated January 20th, 2009. Saying, "I am sure there are many ways that we can work together, and I look forward to close and fruitful cooperation between the Organization of the Islamic Conference and the United States." And several months after that, he had Ekmeladin Ihsanolu to the White House. And Ihsanolu suggested that he appoint a director, an official for Muslim outreach. And that same day, the State Department announced that there would be an office for Muslim outreach within the State Department, and Farah Pandith, who is an Indian Muslim, was appointed the director of this office, and she reports directly to the Secretary of State. As of yet, there is no office for Christian outreach or Jewish outreach or Hindu outreach. In any case, the President then, on June 4th, 2009 in Cairo, during his notorious speech there, his much anticipated speech of outreach to the Islamic world, he said that he considered it his responsibility as president to correct stereotypes of Islam. That was a little noted element of the speech, but you can find the text of the speech, you can see it in there. He considers it his responsibility as president. So you can imagine, I mean, he's elevating this to an incredibly important level, as if his oath of office were that I will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and correct stereotypes of Islam. So help me God. Now, what has been the fallout of this? In the first place, every year since the OIC adopted its initiative against Islamophobia, they have introduced a resolution, Muslim states have introduced a resolution into the United Nations, sponsored by essentially the OIC and supported by all the OIC states, that would criminalize defamation of religions, and even though religions is in the plural, only Islam is mentioned in the text. And it's clear that the goal of this is not to actually calm down all the blasphemy that's going on. It's not to hit at the guy who puts a crucifix into a jar of urine or anything like that. It is only to prevent Western intelligence officials from investigating Islam in regard to its connection to terrorism. And so this resolution has been opposed every year by the Bush administration at the UN. However, a few weeks ago, the United States abruptly changed course on this and actually co-sponsored with Egypt a resolution criminalizing the incitement to religious hatred. And this was done, of course, at the behest of the Obama administration. Now, the implications of that are staggering. For the first time, you have an American administration, you have the United States at the United Nations actually supporting, co-sponsoring a resolution that is in violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution. And there was lip service paid in this resolution as it was passed to the First Amendment to the Constitution, and saying that, that the United States would be exempt from enacting any kind of statutes to criminalize Islamophobia insofar as they were inconsistent with the Constitution. But nonetheless, the signal was clear, because of course, once you have 5 Supreme Court justices on your side, then it becomes not a difficult thing to narrow the interpretation of the First Amendment to such a degree that it becomes effectively meaningless, and to introduce into its interpretation material having to do with hate crimes and hate speech, which of course are all interpreted in the eye of the beholder, are all interpreted in the way that the Obama administration in particular wants them interpreted at this time. And then the First Amendment could effectively be rendered null. The resolution co-sponsored with Egypt is really an incredibly dangerous thing. And I understand that it came up earlier, and Congressman Boehner was not aware of it and said that he would introduce, if he got information about it, which I'm going to send him, something to condemn Obama for this. But it seems clear that this is something in line with Obama's statements in Cairo, in line with his outreach to the OIC, and in line with the OIC's own initiative. It seems clear that this is something Obama wants to do. And he wants to find ways to defang the First Amendment in order to bring this kind of statute into the United States. And that this resolution, co-sponsored with Egypt, was the first salvo in that initiative. And of course, when you look at the Obama administration's record on free speech in general, and how he has tried to silence and demonize his opponents, how he has shown a very slight regard for free speech protections when it comes to gathering information on the internet about his opponents, and in terms of surveillance in general. It is a very disquieting thing that has not gotten a great deal of attention. But the President is, it seems pretty clear, the President is an internationalist. The President does have an interest in submitting American law to the approval of international bodies. And the United States, up to this point, has been the only safeguard against the passage of this kind of law. And with also his sponsorship of hate crimes statutes already, obviously hate crimes are inseparable from hate speech. You can't establish a hate crime. You know, if I go out and slug Jeff, then it's just a crime. But if I call him some name, then it becomes a hate crime. And so I'm not. I won't. Don't worry. But the hate speech, in other words, is already a concept that is being introduced into American law. And unless we begin to be aware of it, and as free citizens to stand up and call upon our representatives to resist it, it's only going to get worse. Thanks very much.